Hey everybody, I'm Matt Robinson. Welcome to another episode of The Writer's Block. Honored to have our guest today, a real light in our journalistic field in the area, Carmen Fields, legendary journalist, was on the Pulitzer Prize-winning team for the Globe when they were doing all the impactful reporting about busing and desegregation in the Boston schools, an anchor on the WGBH 10 o'clock news, and the host and producer of Higher Ground on WHDH. Went to BU like I did, but she went to School of Communications, but was still Terrier proud. Served as a journalism fellow at the Needham Foundation at Harvard. And her latest achievements have to do with her family. She is the writer for PBS's American Experience of Going Back to T-Town, which is also the title of her new book, and it has to do with her father, Ernie Fields, the legendary band leader who played throughout the Jim Crow South and all over the country in a military band, and just about the challenges he had overseas and unfortunately back here at home. Really looking forward to hearing more about the book and to having you here. Such an honor, Carmen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I'm honored to be here as well.
So we kind of have a lot in common. Both of our books were inspired by our respective fathers. Yeah, mine, my dad really kind of got me on the road to being a writer. So I'm always interested, how did your storytelling and journalistic path begin?
Well, it was based out of sibling rivalry. Okay, my father was a band leader, musician. My brother, my older brother and only sibling, is a multi-instrumentalist, and everything he touched turned to music. And then I'm taking all of these lessons on all of these different instruments, and nothing is taken. So in an effort to not be compared with my brother or my father, I discovered writing and began my own newspaper when I was about 9 or 10 years old and went from there. But sibling rivalry. I did not want to be identified or associated or connected to my brother and presumed to be musical. I wanted something in my own little spotlight.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. My dad and his father had both been attorneys, and that was basically the other choice. And I knew I wasn't going to be as good as they were, so I took the road less traveled, as it were. Yeah. So when you were 9 years old, were you doing hard-hitting investigative reporting?
Oh, yes. Different neighbors whose cats had kittens, or if there was a sale in one of the local stores, or events at church that were coming up, real heavy stuff, yeah.
Local news is important. It's kind of a lost art these days.
Indeed.
So how did you find your way to the Globe?
Let's see, a long story short, in undergrad at Lincoln University in Missouri, I studied print journalism and had an internship at the broadcast station in Jefferson City, Missouri, and got kind of interested in broadcast journalism from there. Came to grad school at Boston University in broadcast journalism. Could not find a job in radio or television to save my life. Mm-hmm. And one of my advisors suggested that to cover my bases that I apply at that time, I think there were 3 or 4 daily newspapers in Boston. And Tom Winship, then the editor of the Boston Globe, liked what he saw, and I had a job.
Wow. So you did, and you were on the team covering busing and the riots and the desegregation. That must have been a difficult time, personally and professionally.
Well, it was interesting. Shall I say, when I was at the Globe, because certain residents of South Boston didn't like the coverage that the Globe was giving, they would put tacks in front of the route that the trucks that were delivering the Globe would do. They started firing bullets at the glass at the presses. And so I was there when they decided to reglaze the entire building with bulletproof glass, which included the newsroom. So that was of some comfort as well. But yeah, these were interesting times, shall we say.
Did the work that you did in those topics lead to or become involved with your father, with the book on your father?
Not really. Two different things. The busing and desegregation was in the mid-'70s. I didn't start working with my father on the possibility of a book until the mid-'80s. It was prompted primarily by an interviewer from Rutgers University Institute of Jazz Studies. They commissioned an interviewer to come and spend a couple of days, long interviews with him about his career. And it was something about the fact that Rutgers University was interested in the things my father had been talking about to me informally for all those years. It made me think again, well, you know, maybe this is a story that should be shared more widely.
It's great to see the academic community's interest. I mean, here you are, there's your father on the cover of the catalog for the University of Oklahoma Press who published your book. That must have been an incredible honor.
That was a surprise and an honor indeed.
What was is there a tie to Oklahoma?
Well, I grew up in Oklahoma,
right.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. My father was based in Oklahoma, although he traveled all over the United States, far west, East Coast, New England, southern states, into Canada. But of the academic presses that expressed an interest in the book, I thought University of Oklahoma made the most sense because of our the family ties to Oklahoma.
You still have family there?
Distant relatives. My parents are gone, their siblings are gone, so there aren't as many strong connections to Tulsa as there were before.
Did you ever tour with your father? Did you?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
My mother was a school teacher, and when summer break came, she would often travel with the band, and a couple of summers I would allow to go along. And I have a very vivid memory of getting dressed up when he was performing. In those days, the older days, the vocalists sat in a chair on the stage until it was time for them to perform. And my father would introduce them. Well, I was dressed up and allowed to sit next to the vocalist on the stage while they performed. And that was the cat's meow. The next summer that I went along, I caught the mumps in like Portland, Oregon, or Washington State somewhere, and I associated the mumps and being ill with the traveling, so I didn't go anymore after that.
Did your brother play in your father's bands?
He did, much later. My father started in the late 20s, in the earliest days of jazz, and through the war years and through the Depression. My brother is a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C., and he was getting out of school about the time that my father's biggest musical triumph was, and he joined the organization in the late 50s and early 60s.
As we discussed, when I was writing my book, I learned not only about the subject matter, which were the schools, but also about my dad,
Sure.
which was really gratifying. What were were there any big surprises or discoveries in terms of family history that you found?
Well, my father's, one of his brothers that he was very close to, they were about 8 years apart, my Uncle Clarence. And Uncle Clarence lived 2 doors from us on our street, and he was a music teacher. In doing my research, I discovered, although I knew he was a music teacher, I didn't know the role he had played in helping identify promising musicians to my dad. And so that was eye-opening, both Uncle Clarence's role and those of other teachers in the community as well. And I was also surprised and impressed with the role my mother played in kind of keeping the home fires burning and serving as a bookkeeper and making sure that any leftover funds that my father sent were saved. And so she played an important role in his success, which he acknowledged as many times as he could. He often said to me, if it's one thing that I still love your mother for, she never tried to persuade me not to travel or go on the road or pursue my dreams.
Wow.
So.
Well, having the family, I mean, as writers, having that family support is very important.
Sure.
Any creative endeavor, absolutely.
Sure.
So one of the differences in your father's career at that time was he recorded, which was kind of rare. How did that, he worked with Bob Wills and John Hammond, among other fellow legends, so how did those relationships come together?
He was discovered, if you will, by John Hammond, who was the great talent impresario. Hammond, as the story goes, was in Kansas City and asking around what people knew about up-and-coming musicians. He had just discovered Count Basie maybe the year before. And in asking around, people asked him if he'd heard of Ernie Fields, and that Ernie Fields was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so Hammond came to Oklahoma, made arrangements to hear the band, and was so impressed he had his associate from the booking agency, Willard Alexander Agency, him come and hear him. And from there, they were signed on, and a trip to New York City where they arranged for recordings for him at that time. And that's like 1939. So that distinguishes him from a lot of other so-called territory bands, and they were all over. My father didn't have the literature of a Count Basie or a Duke Ellington, but he had very accomplished musicians that went on to be in those other organizations, and the opportunity to record made the difference in his ability to keep his name alive and out there.
Was he able to kind of expand beyond the typical territory band?
Oh yes, because his territory generally was Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, Arkansas, but I found ads and clippings and reviews of him in Albany, New York, in Portland, Oregon, in places in Canada. In fact, I was very impressed or awed when I found this picture in his memorabilia. It had a frame, a paper cardboard frame with the name of the photographer's studio, and it was in Pocatello, Idaho, and it was taken in the mid-30s. So that's how far his reach was going even then.
So talking about finding the pictures and the memorabilia, how did it become the TV series for PBS?
Well, they're actually two different projects. Going back to T-Town, the documentary that aired on the American Experience was about segregation, how it was lived by everyday people. The executive producer, Judy Crichton, had indicated she wanted a story about segregation, but she didn't want the typical Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, or Mississippi, or those told and retold stories. She wanted something different. And so we got to talking about some of the experiences in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was kind of an any place USA. And therein was that hour-long documentary. Going back to T-Town, the book is exclusively about my father and his travels. Where the title came from, it's the lyric, the first line of my father's recording, T-Town Blues, which was recorded at John Hammond's behest in 1939. I'm going back to T-Town, da 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 da. So that's where that title came from. And we just picked it up and reused it in connection with my father because he was always going back to T-Town. Although his travels took him around the country, He was always going back there.
Coming back to the family.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, indeed.
So, so there really isn't a direct relationship. It's not a companion book.
Oh, no. Oh,
it's
no.
It's a very different project. Okay.
They're two completely different projects. The American Experience aired in 1993.
Okay.
This didn't come out until 2023.
What were there any things that you found in the book research that you were like, oh, I wish I had known that for the program?
No, it was, the book is my father's story. The documentary was Tulsa's story. So they really didn't intersect.
Okay. What were some of, people, I'm native from here.
Sure.
Obviously I was very a little younger when those issues were happening in Boston, but learned my history. What are some of the other biggest differences culturally you've noticed between where you grew up and was there culture shock when you got to Boston?
I guess probably so. That would be a good way to put it, culture shock, because I am a product of segregated schools in Tulsa. I went to Ralph J. Bunch Elementary School, Marian Anderson Junior High School, Booker T. Washington High School. I'm a graduate of a historically black college and university, Lincoln University in Missouri. So I come to grad school at Boston University, and for the first time in my life, I'm the only person of color in all of my classes.
You had a similar situation at the Globe.
A similar situation at the Globe. But compared to what my father was facing in his era of when he didn't know whether or not he could get a meal at a restaurant or use the restroom at a gas station, that has never been an issue when I was at the Globe or any other time in my life. So there, we have evolved significantly from what the issues my father faced when he was traveling on the road.
So, but not all the way there, but
not
evolved.
all the way there. Have evolved.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. So what are some of the lessons that you've taken away from this project and that you hope other people take away from the book in particular?
Well, it's an opportunity to learn about a different era, a different music era, and the fact that the Ernie Fields Orchestra had in its performance times the likes of a Miles Davis had worked with him, the likes of a Amal Jamal, the likes of a Freddie Green, who became the guitar mainstay with the Count Basie Orchestra, the likes of a Big Chief, Russell Moore, a Native American trombonist of note. That impact that my father's organization had beyond just himself is important. I think it's a story of entrepreneurship, how my father continued to evolve and reinvent himself, if you will. He started his own record company after he didn't have a contract with other record companies. He did a lot of his own promotion and let others open doors, like Bob Wills open doors for him for performance venues. It's just a general story of survival that I think we can all take different notes from and help all of us in our individual journeys.
Have you been inspired to pick up an instrument again?
Not on your life.
That's still a hard no?
Not on your life. No, indeed.
But it must have just been, I started my writing career as a jazz guy, and I believe it was the great Bob Blumenthal who said to me, unless you can finish this sentence, you're not going to go too far. One day when Miles and I were, and I was like, come on, Bob, give me a chance. So to have to grow, I mean, I've met my heroes, but I mean, to grow up among them and have that connection must have been absolutely phenomenal.
Well, you mentioned Bob Blumenthal. I ran into him at one of the events for my books. I think it was at Berklee College of Music. And he was complimentary and indicated in my book, the last chapter is what I call a roll call, where I tried to have some information about the hundreds of musicians that cycled through my father's organization. And Bob noted that I had John Hardy, Hardy, that I didn't have any information on. And that was because I probably meant John Hardy, Hardee. And I looked that up, and there's all of this information. Well, hey, I'm just going by my father's notes, and you couldn't find stuff on everybody. But anyway, I appreciated that he had taken the time to read that far in the book.
When you're at your level of your career, you have great friends and colleagues, so that's a tribute to you, and it's a tribute to us that you've joined us. The book is great. I mean, especially being a jazz fan, seeing the names and just having another connection was really rewarding. So, what are you working on now? What's next?
I'm still beating the drum for going back to T-Town, the Ernie Fields territory big band. I want to get that story out as far and as wide. I'm looking toward June, which is Black Music Month, and hope to get more either music venues through colleges and universities or high schools that I can tell the Ernie Fields story to.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important story for music fans, for history fans, and for the not always so happy side of our cultural legacy. But as you said, things are improving. Hopefully this will show people that, as you said, being an entrepreneur, being a survivor, you can move the culture forward.
Lots of lessons learned.
Yeah. Well, it's been a lesson having you here and a pleasure. So thank you very much. And everyone, thank you. Please check out the book. And if you want to learn some great history, go check out the American Experience segment. And hopefully you'll also join us next time on The Writer's Block.